Even in countries where they criminalize our existence, they can't stop us from singing.
Yeah.
They can't stop us from expressing ourselves creatively. Suddenly, the police stormed in with machine guns and held everybody hostage for 2 hours. So we were on the floor for 2 hours in Uganda, about 200 people. My name is Petter Wallenberg, and I'm a Swedish artist, musician, writer, and LGBTQ activist. My art and my activism started even when I was a child. So when I look back at some of my earliest memories of realizing I was different, it's always linked to also being creative and expressing myself. So a concrete example would be like when I was like 5 years old, you know, I remember wanting to go outside and express myself with colorful clothes and dresses and, you know, like a little princess or what have you, and play with creative expression, draw, make things and all that, you know, realizing that it was dangerous to be who I was, that little boys were not allowed to play with dolls, little boys were not allowed to wear dresses, little boys were not allowed to be creative, if you like, you know. So my creativity and my activism all started when I was a child, and I don't really see it any differently today. And I think the important lesson that you learn as a child when you're different is that it's either fight or flight. Either you learn to stand up for yourself, and then that fight continues your whole life, and not just for you, but for others like you too. Or you hide, you try to change who you are, and you go into a much more complicated view of the world. Both paths can be very difficult. But I think, for me, the decision and the choice was there when I was 5 years old. It was like, I'm not going to go away, I'm going to fight. So that's where my activism and my artistic endeavors started. Well, a child doesn't have the words to articulate around identity, sexuality, etc. And a child shouldn't, you know, a child is a child. But as a child who is different, you learn very early on that the things that you like and the things that you want to do are considered wrong by other children or adults, you know. So it's everything from what color you like. You know, I love the color pink, which is very taboo for little boys to like, you know. And of course, I wanted to play with dolls, but I wanted to play with robots too. I mean, I wanted to play with the whole toy box, with the whole dressing up box, which I think every child should be allowed to. And a child doesn't have the sort of understanding of the world to sort of articulate, I'm different. That child just knows, I'm not allowed to do or be what I want. And I think that's one of the most crippling things we can do to children, because you're then saying, this world is not your world. You're not part of it, you're not allowed to be part of it. But somehow my parents, although I could sense that they weren't overjoyed about me dressing up in drag when I was 5, still they did teach me to stand up for myself. And they did say, if the other kids are bullying you, fight back, you know, and even stand up to adults, you know. So I think what I did learn at an early age was, you know, say no and fight back and stand up for yourself. And then later on, I learned how to articulate who I was and why I was different. But I was being called names before I even knew what the names mean. And I think for a lot of gay people or LGBT people, we can identify with that. With the surrounding world around us identifies who we are immediately before we even know it ourselves. And they put us in a box before we're even allowed to sort of flourish and discover who we are. So I wouldn't say that as a 5-year-old I knew all that, but I knew instinctively that I had to fight for what I wanted in this world. Well, from the age of 5 onwards, my self-expression was a form of activism. I remember the other kids throwing stones at me when I was like dancing around in frilly dresses. And I just remember thinking, fuck you, you know. You may throw stones, but I'm gonna keep dancing, you know. And I just remember even then as a sort of like, I felt rebellious, and I was like, the more you attack me, the more you throw stones, the faster I'm gonna dance, and the brighter I'm gonna shine. And I remember even as a child thinking that. So I think that was a sort of common theme throughout growing up. And then when I became a teenager, when I reached puberty, and then it really hit full bloom, and I just sort of like completely started expressing myself with a lot of different ways of dressing. And I remember that there was an old teacher from the olden days, and he was really horrified and really like homophobic. And the funny thing is that moment, because the other kids were homophobic too, but they liked the fact that I was kind of provoking the teacher. So, I became a kind of, it was like I became an accepted rebel because at least the teacher was angry too. So when they could sense that he was really nervous about the whole thing, so they started shouting gay at the teacher. Oh. And he was really nervous and like, he probably was really anxious about the whole thing. And I just remember that being a turning point where it was like, a moment where you can turn things around just by having the balls to like stand up for yourself and going out there and sort of being visible and standing up for yourself. But of course, there was a risk even then. I mean, that moment was a sort of triumph, but many times when I was younger, as a young gay man, you're much more vulnerable because you're sort of outwardly presenting a much more easy target, So there were many times when I got subjected to homophobia in the street and when I moved to London was very hardcore, dangerous place in the 90s. There was violence and aggression and homophobia. And when you have to fight for yourself at an early age, you learn being who you are will at some point allow some form of confrontation. Are you ready for it, And for me, I think my whole life was just a sort of training ground of how do we deal with that confrontation? But now I want to work on a bigger scale and I want to work internationally. So, I now work in Africa, I work in Uganda, I work in countries where it's illegal to be gay. And I use that same energy and the same rebelliousness to fight back on a larger scale, to work on a political scale, on a societal level. I'm a man who wears many hats. And, many hats. But I mean, first and foremost, I would say I'm a creative person and an activist. So I'm a musician, I'm a writer, and I'm an artist. But I also run two companies. One is Rainbow Riots, which is a non-profit organization working for LGBT rights around the world, especially in countries where it's illegal or controversial to be gay. So with Rainbow Riots, I creative collaborations with vulnerable queer communities and LGBT artists around the world, using art and creativity as a way to bring the community together and also reach out and get the message out into the wider world. So we work with some really vulnerable community members in Uganda where it's illegal to be LGBT.
There is an urge to be free. There is a determination to be free. There is a desire to be proud of what people are.
Ingen vet såklart vad som kommer hända. Det finns en känsla här nere av att tillsammans är vi starka. Det handlar inte om att springa runt och festa och strö på sig glitter och ha lite kul, utan det handlar om liv och död. Det handlar om att överleva.
Although you hate us, we are here to stay.
I was in India when it was illegal, and I was working with the LGBT community, and I created India's first Pride anthem. So I've done a lot of different things internationally. Currently, we're still working in Uganda on a new Rainbow Riots project, which is out at the moment. It's a musical collaboration between me, the legendary American drag performer Lady Bunny, and queer voices from Uganda. So it's a very, very exciting platform to work around the world and meet other LGBT people and artists, community members from the very highest kind of echelons of, American drag pop superstardom like Lady Bunny to very marginalized, forbidden queer voices in the outskirts of Kampala in Uganda. Combining our brothers and sisters across different continents and platforms to sort of create one big queer sort of a voice. Even in countries where they criminalize our existence, they can't stop us from singing.
Yeah.
They can't stop us from expressing ourselves creatively. So I feel that as queer people, creativity has always been our superpower. It's the most brave thing you can see, because with a world that's constantly trying to suppress our joy, to be happy about who we are, to dare to express joy is the bravest and strongest thing you can do. Uganda, 10 years ago when I first started work, and when that first came to global attention about 10 years ago, Uganda was very much considered the most homophobic country in the world. So I thought, I gotta go there. Because I thought, if you really wanna go out into the world and make a change and see what it's like, then you gotta challenge yourself and you gotta go to situations where you might not be comfortable.
Yeah.
But if you really want to discover and try and make a change and do something, do it. So I went to Uganda and I got into the LGBT community, and we started making music together, we started bonding, we became really close friends, and we started doing creative work and community building work. And then a horrific experience happened, which I would say changed everything, and which is the reason why I'm still working in Uganda. That was 2016 when I was part of the team, and we were working on some performances for Pride Uganda. They were doing some Pride events, and there was a drag show, and very much like Pride events around the world, celebrating queer culture. And we were there as part of the group, and we were going to do a performance with our team. Suddenly, the police stormed in with machine guns and held everybody hostage for 2 hours. So we were on the floor for 2 hours in Uganda, about 200 people. Policemen with machine guns were walking around. They were beating up people, especially anyone with gender non-conforming expressions, such as drag or trans. They were violently beating them up. And 2 hours of being held hostage before everyone were let go. And it was really quiet, and the only thing that you could hear was someone crying. Well, at the moment when I was on the floor and we were all held hostage, you just go into, I think it's probably a shock, you go into it's a weird kind of calm almost, because you can't do anything. It's a very, very bizarre situation, and I think maybe it would be similar to be on the Titanic or something, like a boat that's going to sink, because you're all collectively trapped in a situation where individually there's nothing you can do. But that's also a very, very interesting feeling to take with you, because in the eye of the storm, they say that's where the calm lies. And I think to fight for change and to fight that battle, you have to keep that inner calm. So, it was a horrific experience, but also I would say life-changing, because it made me dedicated to continue this fight and to not give up on Uganda, but also continue this fight in other countries too, and to just basically take this horrific experience and turn it into fuel and ammunition to sort of continue fighting for change. I think, on this journey of being different in a society where you're taught as a child that you're not allowed to be different and it's wrong to be who you are, we're going to carry that with us throughout our lives in different ways. Everything's fine, and then you sort of, you carry on with your life, and you do positive things and you stay strong and happy, but then boom, something will throw you back to that moment when you were a 5-year-old and they were throwing stones at you. And for me, the last few years have been that moment. In Sweden, I run a drag theatre company and an organization, it's both, called Bland drakar och drag queens, which means amongst dragons and drag queens, for different age groups, but shows for children have become very popular. So we've also written a children's book, and we do storytelling with our book, and it's kind of like theatrical, using the art form of drag as a sort of form of clown theatre.
Bil som börjar på B som i början på en banan. B som i början på bra.
But showing kids that it's okay to be who you are. Be kind to each other, it's okay to be who you are. Please read a book, learn some reading, learn some writing, express yourself, be a part of this world. All those things that I wanted to do when I was 5 and I had to fight for. That's what I want to sort of inspire other kids today to have, to not feel that, you know, you're gonna have to accept being bullied for wanting to express yourself. And that's, you know, that's the prime message. Because that kid that you're helping might not even be different in the same way that you're different, but that kid might be different in another way. And for that kid to see that you dare to stand up and express yourself and you dare to express joy, that will help that kid. So that's the thought behind it, and it's become extremely successful and extremely popular. So we do 200 shows a year. You know, we travel all over Sweden, Finland, we're going to Norway in a couple of weeks. So we're all over the Nordics, extremely busy, super popular, more in demand than ever. But in the last few years, there's been a real change in the climate towards LGBT people. So there's a lot of hate and a lot of homophobia, LGBT phobia, and a lot of it is directed at people like us who are out there in the kind of public sphere, being visible, showing queer visibility, representation of outward sort of openness in terms of being LGBT. And there's definitely a pendulum that's swinging now. And I've always said that. The pendulum for LGBT acceptance swings back, and it's swung back and forth throughout history in every culture. And I'm hoping that the pendulum isn't going to swing back that far. But I'll tell you what, I'm not going to take it like without a fight, you know. So if the pendulum is heading this way, I'll stand even stronger and I'll shine even brighter, and I'll, like I did when I was 5, I'll keep on dancing, you know. So these past few years have been that very much in a nutshell. I've reported 150 people to the police.
Oh, wow.
And through my lobbying and through my sort of stubbornness, things are moving now. So I was invited to the Swedish House of Parliament and I held a speech about this situation, about the hate crimes that we're subjected to.
Hej allihopa! Det är jag som är Petter Wallenberg. Jag är grundare och regissör för Bland drakar och drag queens. Vi gör sagostunder, föreställningar och musikaler på bibliotek, teatrar, skolor och så vidare i Sverige och Finland. Våra artister heter Inga Tvivel, Björta och Tant Henrik. Och de är till...
And people listened, the parliament listened, the decision makers listened. So what we're seeing now is, for the first time, I think, the police are really, really cracking down on LGBT hate crimes on an industrial scale. Then we as LGBT people need to know that finally we have rights protecting us, and we have to report when those rights are when they're being breached, when someone's trying to take away your human rights. You have to stand up. So the positive outcome of this situation is, after 3 years of feeling like I was being thrown back to being 5 years old, I really felt those feelings come back of being like a child again. You know what? I'm not a child anymore, and we're not children anymore, and we're not helpless. So once I reported all those crimes, and I'm telling you, that's a nightmare, because that's a huge process. And I understand why a lot of people don't do it, because it's a huge job. You kind of almost have to be a lawyer, or you have to be slightly obsessive to actually deal with 150 police reports, because it's a very difficult process. But once I did it, and the police took it seriously, it was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders, because then I felt like I'm not alone anymore, and we're not alone anymore, and I felt like the legal system, the police, the prosecutors, they're taking this seriously. Mm-hmm. So that was like after 3 years of living in a throwback to the hate that I received when I was a 5-year-old. I felt like in the last few months, with the hate crimes being taken seriously, that weight was lifted, and now I feel like I'm back to that sort of happy, rebellious me, and I'm like, okay, fine, let's put on a dress and sort of keep dancing while they're throwing stones. Yeah. So, I mean, I think to answer your question, our lives are going to be a constant fight sometimes, but not always. But they're going to be a constant reminder of where we came from. Mm. And what we need to remember is it goes up and it back down, and it fluctuates. And I don't think we can ever change where we've come from, neither collectively nor individually, individualistically, But what we can do is recognize the pattern and see that. The trauma of our background will rear its ugly head, but you can fight back and you can conquer it. Yeah. And I think the quest for joy and the quest for peace of mind and the quest for community and a sense of belonging is an ongoing quest. So I think that's the most important thing that we can do. Fight the hatred, but also the self-hatred. A lot of LGBT people deal with internalized homophobia, and they direct it at each other. So I always try and say, try and conquer those negative emotions, and again, try and feel joy and love for each other and yourself. That's the bravest and the strongest thing you can do, and that's the strongest weapon in this battle. I'm always kind of like assessing what happened there. How can I do it differently? And I think that's part of the sort of the human condition. And I think I'm gonna buck the trend, and I'm gonna say no. I'm not one of those people that has no regrets. I have loads of regret. I regret a lot. But I think the sort of the thing that you have to kind of remember is to not be so hard on yourself. I think my biggest regret is being so hard on myself. And I think maybe we are, as LGBT people, as gay people, maybe we're more self-critical because we're so aware. We're so aware of like the dangers around us. And sometimes the danger might just be very subtle, but it's the danger of expressing who you are, showing who you are. And in some countries that can be physical danger. It can lead to violence or death, so on a sort of on a scale of varying degrees. Of course, we always kind of look at ourselves and we monitor our behavior and we think, oh, how did I do there? And I think that can lead us to being very hard on ourselves. And if I had one regret, it would be to not be so hard on myself. And I work on that constantly. I mean, I'm constantly super hard on myself. And I think that is something that I would like to sort of try and work more on, and try and be kinder to yourself and to each other, and maybe just sort of not analyze things so much, which I know and I understand why we do it, but I wish for once we could be carefree, and maybe that's why celebrating Pride is such a strong force in our community, because it's the one day when we can actually let go. So I'd like to just remind us and the world that joy, don't just have it for Pride, try and have it a little bit every day.
Who do you imagine you will be in the next 10 years?
In the next 10 years, I want to be content and happy and just sort of living life and continuing to fight for change, continuing to do what I do, continuing to use creativity as a weapon against hatred, but also maybe at a slower pace. So maybe I'll be sat in some nice little, on some nice little beach somewhere and just kind of, looking back on my life and saying, you did quite well, girl.
Very nice. And let's say 100 years later, what do you think? What do you want your legacy to be for the world?
I think, if anything, I think the legacy that I want to leave behind is just for every child to grow up and dare to be themselves and to express themselves. And, if I can leave a small legacy with the people that I touch through my work here and now today, and maybe some of them will take that strength with them, that'll make me happy. And it doesn't even have to be 100 years from now. I mean, if that's 10 years from now, that's great.
And if you can talk to yourself when you were 5 years old, where you were doubting, you were bullied, that version of yourself, what would you say to him?
If I could speak to myself as a 5-year-old, I would say, baby, you're doing really well and you're amazing and you're fabulous as you are. Don't let them dim your shine. Don't let them scare you. Keep standing up for yourself. Keep fighting. Keep dancing. Keep expressing that creativity and that life force. Don't let that negativity go under your skin and affect who you are or your outlook on the world. And you know what? If they keep throwing stones at you, you keep dancing and you dance faster and shine brighter and you love harder and you sing louder.
So beautiful. And if you have one message to the world, what would you be?
One message to the world, it would be, let's just let each other love and live and be who we are and keep fighting for a better world and not sort of try and put other people down.
Yeah.
Live and let live. That's my message to the world. Live and let live.
And one last question. If your life is a movie, what do you think the title of that movie will be?
Blood, sweat, and sequins. Well, the blood and the sweat is the fighting, and the sequence is the glitter and the creativity.